T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to a special Mother's Day edition of the Denim Dungeon podcast, a 49ers podcast brought to you by El Jefe Tequila. I am your host, Brian Rennick, a writer and editor at 49ers Web Zone. And I am joined to my right on the screen. I'm not going to point because I'm still not good at that yet. But that's my co-host, my fellow contributor, but most importantly, my hetero life mate, Tim Sprinkles. Tim, how's your Mother's Day going?
It's been a wonderful Mother's Day for me. I believe for us, we spent the day together. We sent our wives off to Reno to have a great spa package and get away from the kids. We took our kids miniature golfing, and then some wonderful gentleman gave us $100 worth of arcade tokens, and we just let our kids run wild, man. And it was just a phenomenal day.
It was a good day. And so I am excited because I feel like this day is better now because we have a special guest tonight. We tweeted it out. We have with us the artist formerly known as Splash Cousin, Mr. Jordan Elliott. Jordan, man, how's your Mother's Day going?
It's going pretty good. It's an adjustment for me. My mom moved to Colorado a couple years ago, so this is now year 2 where I don't really get to see her in person. It's an adjustment, but part of life, right? We got to go through these changes and take them head on. But I luckily was able to speak to her earlier, send her some flowers, and my brother's over there holding it down for me. I got Father's Day duty in a month. My dad's over here, so we kind of take turns. So. I'm kind of just coasting, hanging out on this Mother's Day.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the kiddos were like, why are the moms leaving? And it's like, well, because that's the greatest gift of all. So yeah, we are here, and one of the things that I want to talk about, Jordan, and I let you know ahead of time, is we have to live vicariously through you, through Jason Aponte. You guys got to attend the 2022 NFL draft in Las Vegas. And I'm just wondering, man, what was your experience? What was that like? What were the highlights? Were there lowlights? Anything you learned? Anything that you thought, hey, I expected this and got this? What was your overall impression?
It was pretty cool, man. It was my first time in Vegas ever. So, it was a learning experience across the board for me. I wasn't really familiar with anything there, having never been there. So it was cool. It's hot. I'll be honest. I'm not a big fan of the heat, and apparently it wasn't like that hot. People were giving me a hard time, but if I step outside at midnight and it's 85 degrees, like, to me, that's pretty hot. But it was a cool time, and it was really cool to see. There was a lot of NFL fans I saw pretty much every fan base represented there. A ton of 49ers fans. The only other team I would say there was more of than 49ers fans were Raiders fans, and that makes sense given the fact that they play in Las Vegas. It was really cool. I think it's a situation where the NFL needs to take a strong look at circling back and making Vegas the annual location where they just have it there every single year. And again, I'm not somebody who's super big on Las Vegas. I had never been there before this. I have no plans to go back anytime soon. But just from a convenience standpoint, everything's so close. You have so many restaurants, hotels, bars, casino, all that stuff where it's within walking distance, and it really is just convenient for the fan. After going to Indianapolis for the Combine, that was kind of the big selling point for having it in Indianapolis, is that everything in downtown Indy is so close to it, one another, that it makes it just easy to do events like this. So I'd be really interested to see what the NFL does. Next year, it's in Kansas City, and then the year after, it's in Detroit. Beyond that, I don't think anything's set in stone. So again, if I'm the league office, I'm looking at the success they had there, the spectacle, all the allure that comes with Vegas, up and down the strip there on the boulevard. They have everything, in the city that's known for having all these attractions. The NFL was king for a week, and I think that that's just something that they should strongly look at keeping going forward. And hey, I'll be honest, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think a lot of people would be more than willing to sacrifice a couple days to go watch the draft in Vegas rather than, no offense, going to Kansas City, Detroit, Cleveland, some of these other cities in the Midwest. It just feels like it's a little bit more appealing to the common individual.
Oh yeah, 100%. I haven't met anyone that's like, man, I'm real pumped to go to Cleveland. I'm real pumped to go to Kansas City. I mean, people who are big on barbecue, hey, Kansas City seems like one of the places to be. But Vegas definitely has a little bit more to offer than a lot of those Midwest cities. So outside of, we saw some photos, the gun show that you and Jason had when you posed with Kenny Mayne. And so I know you saw Kenny Mayne. You also saw, who else did you see with Kenny? Was it
he was with Trey Wingo, and they were coming out of the sports book, right after the Warriors game. And Kenny and I both had bet a pretty generous spread. I think the Warriors were like -9 or something like that in that game. And I didn't care. I'm wearing my Shark stuff now. I was wearing my Warriors jersey then. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm a big Bay Area sports guy. So I'm in my Draymond Green jersey. So Kenny Mayne, comes up, and he was feeling pretty good. He definitely probably had a couple cocktails. And he was like, "Oh man, you guys screwed me," because I guess he had a parlay with the Bucks too. So the Warriors not covering that got him. Whereas I'm the Warriors fan, where I'm like, "Hey, I lost my bet, but I really don't care. They won, they advanced." But he was really cool, man. I'm not gonna lie. I grew up watching Kenny Mayne on SportsCenter, and it was really cool to get the chance to be like, "Hey, man, you're a legend in my eyes," and we're hanging out in Caesars just talking about parlays and spreads and playoff basketball. So yeah, it was such a chance occurrence. We were waiting for one of Jason's friends to meet us in the lobby there at Caesars, and I'm like, that's Kenny Mayne and Trey Wingo. They walk right by us. So it wasn't forced. We didn't have to, flag him down or chase him down or anything. I never like doing anything like that. But yeah, it was really cool, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So go ahead. You had an opportunity to meet a bunch of players. Who would you say gave probably one of the better insights or one of the better conversations that you got to speak with, whether it be at the Combine or at the NFL draft?
Man, that's hard, because if we're doing the Combine too, it gets way tougher. I really like talking to Leon O'Neal, and it's, what a chance occurrence the Niners end up bringing him in as an undrafted free agent. He just had this energy to him, and this. I always applaud people who are able to tiptoe that fine line between being extremely confident without spilling over into being kind of arrogant and full of themselves. And I thought he did that perfectly, where he was somebody where I wasn't just oh man, this guy's full of himself, he's going to get humbled coming into the league. It didn't feel like that at all. It felt like, no, this is somebody who truly believes in themselves, and the energy and the electricity that they're bringing to this conversation isn't just fabricated. This is genuinely who they are. So if we're talking formal interview and asking questions in a media setting, Leon O'Neal was definitely my favorite that I had the chance to talk to. Another guy I really liked, and it's great it worked out this way, is Spencer Burford. I'm glad I took the time to go talk to Spencer, because the 49ers ended up selecting him in the 4th round. But if we're talking just overall interactions one-on-one, I was very, very impressed with 2 picks that the Jets made, actually. Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver, was just fantastic. Really liked talking to him. And then Jermaine Johnson was the other guy. He was pretty cool. Jason and I talked to him one-on-one at this little event that they did for media after a Play 60 event, where the guys, the first-round draft picks who were there, were doing drills and, working with some of the local youth football teams there in Vegas. And they gave us about an hour or so to talk to these guys. And it was the day before they're going to get drafted. So, there's some nerves there, but they were all kind of, it's biggest night of their life coming up. So they were pretty were pretty welcoming and open given the circumstances. I can't say I'd be as put together as they were if I knew the weight of what was coming. But yeah, those guys are really cool. One other name I would throw out there was I really was impressed by Devin Lloyd too, the linebacker from Utah who went to Jacksonville. He was somebody that definitely left an impression.
Yeah, that package that the NFL Network had for him when he got drafted, talking about the teammate that they had, that running back that was killed in I think it was his sophomore year. Just seemed like a really impressive kid. A lot of leadership ability there, a lot of leadership traits, and so he seems like I mean, I'm kind of bummed he went to Jacksonville, but hopefully he can find his way there. But so let me ask you this real quick before we move on. So Leon O'Neal, right? Someone that you were impressed with. Obviously the 49ers did end up with Leon, not as a draft pick, but as an undrafted free agent. What kind of role do you see Leon O'Neal filling on this 49er squad?
I think the potential for like an immediate impact would be as if they're in a position where they want to carry a fifth linebacker and have somebody who's kind of that role we saw them give to Marcel Harris, where they weren't quite a linebacker, weren't quite a safety, you're kind of somewhere in the middle. Because I just think that what they ask of their safeties, particularly when they spin Jimmy Ward down, having to cover that deep third. I'm not saying Leon O'Neal can't do it. I just wouldn't count on that right away. But I do think there's a path to him getting viable snaps right away in sort of a hybrid role, because he was fantastic, in my opinion, in the box. He obviously has some things that he's going to have to clean up. There's a reason why enough teams felt like passing him 7 times over. But I see a lot of potential there. And again, I'm so sold on the individual. He's somebody to me that from the moment I spoke to him felt like he was going to do whatever it took to be great. And that's the thing, is that I think a lot of people overlook the fact that, they think, well, everybody in the NFL wants to be great. Like, no, it's not the case. You'd be shocked at how many of these guys get by on just being freakishly talented and very athletic and having those physical abilities. Tim probably can attest to that, playing D1 football. Like, there's a lot of guys that get by simply based on ability, but when you have that hunger on top of it, I think that's really what separates people. And I think that Leon O'Neal has that hunger. And I think that, while I would have liked to see him get drafted, I think that him coming in as an undrafted free agent isn't the worst thing in the world from a, chip on the shoulder standpoint, where this guy already appeared to have that hunger. I can only imagine how much greater it is now.
Yeah, Dante Pettis has entered the chat when it comes to talented, but not necessarily ready to put in the work. What were you going to say, Tim?
Well, Jordan hit it nail on the head. When you get to that next level and you get to this basically, when you start weeding out all of the guys that kind of don't cut it or don't have the athletic ability, everybody's phenomenal. Everybody can run. Everybody's strong. It comes down to who's going to be the mentally toughest, who's going to be sort of what you described about Leon O'Neal, where you just believe in yourself above all else, and you're willing to put in the work and the effort and do whatever it takes to be successful. And that's why you see some of these guys, later draft picks, undrafted free agents, who kind of develop a little chip on their shoulder, and they're willing to do what the guys who were drafted in the first, second, and third round aren't willing to do. And they put in that time, they put in that work. And those are the guys that sometimes, they find either a role or they wind up being special. And I love hearing that, Jordan. I love hearing that Leon O'Neal is that kind of a guy. He's got the body, 6 feet tall, about 205 pounds. I think he has freakishly big hands, something like over 10 inches, 10 and a quarter. A big dude like that. I know his 40 time wasn't great at 4.7, mid 4.7s. But he seems to play faster than that on the field. And if he's big, he's physical, he's got the work ethic. Yeah, I think he'll make an impact, whether it be on special teams or finding a role as kind of that Marcel Harris kind of / safety linebacker.
Yeah, and you played too at a high level, Tim. So I think too many people get caught up in testing numbers when ultimately, hey, they can give us it's more tools at our disposal to make an evaluation. But ultimately, all that's going to matter is how fast are you when the pads, the helmet, on the field. Like, that's really what is going to separate guys. And for me, Leon didn't look like a guy that was running 4-7, when he was fitting run gaps, when he was left, playing the deep third. Like, he looked like a guy that, well, hey, he's not the fastest guy on the field. I'm not going to sit here and say that. He definitely didn't look like somebody where I was coming away like, oh, this guy's too slow to play at the NFL level. And I think that sometimes those testing numbers can be extremely misleading from that standpoint.
Well, there's a big difference.
Oh.
I was just going to say, there's a big difference between running in a straight line and then running on a football field with pads on. Yeah, Jordan, you're right. We can only get so much from the measurables and from those testing marks, but on a football field, it's a great separator. And you can look at, the greatest receiver in the history of the NFL didn't have a phenomenal 40 time. Many guys were faster than him in a straight line, but he was never caught from behind, ever. And there's just a way, like, how quickly do you get to full speed? How quickly can you change direction, change gears? 40 times are fun to talk about, but ultimately it comes down to what can you do on the field, when there's 10 other guys or 11 other guys trying to stop you.
Well, and not only that, but, you can, when we talk about these measurables, right, what we're talking about is 2 opportunities to run the 40 at the combine, and then probably 2 or 3 opportunities to run the 40 at the pro day. So you're talking about 2 days and 4 or 5 opportunities to run, and anybody can have a bad day. And so that's where it's, these measurables are great. And they are important, because drafting athletes in a professional sport is probably a good route to go, right? That's one of the things I like most about the 49ers draft class, is that they did draft a lot of athletes. But you got to look at the tape as well. And if the speed from the 40 isn't showing up on tape, or if the speed on the tape isn't showing up in the 40, then there's a disconnect there that you then have to get into, with the player themselves. And so I'm excited for Leon O'Neal, the undrafted free agent class. I said this on Twitter. It might actually, to me, be more impressive than the drafted players that they had. Now, obviously, there's guys that I am excited about. One of those being, and we talked about last time, Tariq Castro-Fields. That's another guy that went probably later than most people thought, and probably later than he thought. One of the things that I love is I listened to the most recent episode of Locked On 49ers with Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker. And one of the things Crocker said was, Castro-Fields reached out to him via DM on Twitter and was basically like, hey, what do I need to work on? Like, what do I need to do to get better? I'm like, that's the kind of attitude that is going to find success in the NFL. And so with that, I want to move on, because we got to talk about another person who seems to have the intangible, seems to have the character. The person is almost more impressive than the player, and that is Trey Lance. And the reason that we want to talk about Trey Lance is because now that the draft has ended and Deebo Samuel appears to be a 49er moving forward, the narrative has changed, right? We got to find other things to get 49ers Twitter and 49er fans to click on, because we're suckers like that, and we will engage. I said 49ers Twitter's slogan should be 49ers Twitter, we engage, right? So anytime anything negative comes out, we're there. And something negative came out earlier this week, and it was from Matt Lombardo, who, has a blue check mark on Twitter, has, a fairly good reputation. But his tweet said, is actually a quote tweet of Hayden Winks, who said, if Jimmy G stays on the 49ers this year, I'm convinced Shanahan wanted Mac Jones and was forced into Lance. Matt Lombardo quote tweeted that and said, I have heard that the 49ers staff has been continually underwhelmed by Trey Lance. And so we are here tonight with Tim, with Jordan, to say, let's go ahead and put that rumor to bed. Let's go ahead and point out there is no way that this coaching staff has been underwhelmed by Trey Lance. We know one coach that was, and we can get into that. But Jordan, I want to give you the floor. What is it that you have seen in Trey that tells you, hey, you know what? There's no way that this coaching staff has been underwhelmed by this guy.
Well, I'll be honest. So, first of all, I understand that fans are going to be very passionate, and a lot of the backlash I saw towards Matt Lombardo, I personally don't really echo that. So, I don't think that he just made this up out of thin air. I'm sure that he heard from somebody or heard something where he got that information. I don't think he's somebody that would go out and put out false information. But what really stood out to me about the report when he was kind of pressed on it and asked to expand was that what he mentioned specifically was arm strength. There was a couple things, but that was really like, if I'm reading this block of words, that's the one that's jumping off the page at me, was that they were underwhelmed with his arm strength. Because I saw Trey Lance throw a ton during training camp. I saw him throw after the finger injury. I saw him throw during the regular season. We all got to see the games where he played, the 2 games that he played this past season. And while I think there's plenty of room for him to grow, I think that, there was a lot of, especially if you go to that Texans game, there were a lot of issues in the first half of that game that I think will get cleaned up with time, but it definitely is, he certainly isn't a finished product. I have not watched Trey Lance once and come away with him having arm strength that has underwhelmed me. And not only that, I don't know how anybody could watch Trey Lance and have their takeaway be that they were underwhelmed with his arm strength. Hey, if you want to talk about him being a little bit late with some of his progressions, getting adjusted to NFL game speed, stuff like that, I can see the argument to be made. I, for days now, have struggled to sit here and think how anybody credible could have watched Trey Lance with the rocket launcher that he has for a right arm, and come away with him having arm strength that underwhelms him. Like, if anything, there's reps I watched of Trey Lance, especially in camp, where I'm like, you need to take a little off, dude. Like, you're throwing this too hard. You need to get some touch on some of these throws. You need to get a little bit more, more finesse, less power. And that's what really stood out to me. And it felt like Lombardo kind of, was like, well, some of these, when he was pressed on, he was like, well, some of these were from training camp and from, because realistically, the 49ers aren't doing anything as a team right now. Like, I think they just started rookie minicamp a couple days ago. The majority of the stuff that they've done has been individual workouts since the season ended. So sure, Trey Lance is throwing with Brandon Ayuk and some of these guys, but there hasn't been some central activity among the team in recent, the last couple months since the season ended, where anybody from the 49ers staff would be able to even form an opinion about being underwhelmed. So that's the other thing that really stood out to me. So I just wanted to make that clear. And then, I don't want to speak for people on the 49ers staff, but I think what you see with Trey Lance is what you saw when you saw his college tape. He's a very raw athlete. He's big. He's strong. He has a big arm. He played in a pro-style offense. He operated from under center. He was really, really good at subtle things like having a good ball fake. His footwork, getting out of the pocket, I thought was pretty good on those bootlegs. And he had things he needed to work on, like that hitch in his throw is something that definitely, I thought, improved actually from the Arizona game to the Texans game. Still has a bit more room to improve. So, there's not really much I can say in terms of like what I can say that would make them being underwhelmed being a flat out lie. Because I'm sure, honestly, there was somebody on the 49ers staff that felt that way. I don't think the information is objectively false. I just think that the notion that it was like the staff as a whole or the majority of the staff is where I have an issue with it, because I don't think that's the case whatsoever. All the information that I've heard from people who are generally pretty spot on with their stuff has been that they, he got better throughout the course of the season. And once that finger injury healed, he started looking a whole lot better than he did at the beginning part of the season, at the end of camp. So I think ultimately, there's a lot to like with Trey Lance, and it just depends on how you want to look at things. If you want to look at things like, hey, he's still raw, there's a long way to go, I'm pessimistic that this guy's going to pan out, more power to you. If you're like me and you want to be a little bit more optimistic, there's a lot of positives to focus on, and a lot of it isn't just the physical ability. A lot of it is the cerebral ability. And I think, Tim could probably explain it a little bit better than I can, having played the position at a high level. But I think a lot of what he needs to work on is really stuff that just needs to be sorted out with game reps. It's not something where it's an issue where he needs to spend more time in the film room. He needs to spend more time on the practice field. Like, I think he's checking all those boxes. It's just a matter of going out there and, kind of seeing live action and being there at NFL speed, because as much as you can emulate some of this stuff during practice, you're never going to be going at full speed during practice. Like, you need those game reps to get better. So I apologize for the long-winded answer, but I think that what ultimately happened is that there was maybe a couple members of the 49ers coaching staff on their way out. If people remember, there's been not a mass exodus, but there's been a handful of coaches that were with the team last year who no longer are. And I wouldn't be surprised if on their way out, they maybe echoed some stuff that they played a little bit closer to the vest when they were actually employed by the organization. And I think that got spun into, instead of a couple, I don't know if disgruntled's the word, but a couple of employees on the way out feeling this way about Trey Lance, it got spun as like the 49ers as an organization are underwhelmed and regretting a pick that they made barely 12 months ago. So I personally think it was a like misdiagnosed situation, or it was a situation that wasn't painted the way that maybe Lombardo or whoever reported this initially intended.
So I do want to clarify, because you are right. Like, Lombardo did essentially come out after the tweet, 95-7 the game, had him on, and he kind of clarified what it was that he was saying with that tweet. And so what he said was, this all stems from a conversation that I had with an executive who's pretty tight with people within the 49ers organization, then following up with a couple of members of the coaching staff. The feeling around San Francisco, dating back to last summer during training camp, was a little bit of disappointment over the Trey Lance that arrived in training camp versus what they saw on film at North Dakota State from an arm strength standpoint, from a deep ball accuracy standpoint. And then he said, and the questions that I keep hearing about the deep ball accuracy and the arm strength in practice, some whispers about how quickly he's understanding the playbook and all of those things. The general vibe is this might not have been what the 49ers hoped they were getting when they gave up all that draft capital last year to go get him. And so really what I want to focus on is a couple of members of the coaching staff. Like you said, there are some coaches who are no longer with the 49ers. And here is, you've got to connect some dots, right? So Matt Lombardo is a reporter from Philadelphia, and a former 49ers quarterback coach was in Philadelphia in the 2020 season before coming back to San Francisco, and that was Rich Scangarello. In fact, Grant Cohn quoted Rich Scangarello from a podcast, and on that podcast, he said, do you want a guy who throws it hard and 70 yards, or a guy that runs really fast? Or do you want a guy who throws with anticipation, on time, allows yak, processes, a natural leader, those qualities? And so we've known for a while with direct knowledge that Scangarello was not a Trey Lance fan in the draft. In fact, he was pretty anti-Trey. He told Kyle Shanahan, look, I can't fix his mechanics. So if you want this guy, like, you're going to essentially have to live with those poor mechanics, which to me, I mean, to hear a coach say basically, like, I can't coach this guy, really what you're saying is like, well, then you're not a good coach, right? Like, if you don't feel like you can coach, like, is there really any mechanical flaw that with reps and with good coaching, you cannot fix? Possibly. I don't know. Tim would be able to speak to that better than I would, but it really does feel like, again, this is kind of it feels pretty certain that at least one of those coaching staff members that Lombardo was talking to definitely was Rich Scangarello, who is no longer the quarterback's coach of the 49ers. And so, I don't want to say it's sour grapes, because I don't think it is, but I do think that, he was vocal about not wanting Trey Lance to be the pick at 3. So it stands to reason then that he also has some relatively negative things to say. And I really bristle at that part where it says, do you want somebody that processes and is a natural leader? Because I feel like we've seen both of those things from Trey Lance. The leadership is off the charts. He's texting guys that are getting drafted in the 2022 draft, reaching out, FaceTiming, things like that, where you're like, that is, this kid didn't even turn 22 until a few days ago. And he's the one reaching out to some of these drafted players. So I just don't think that matches up with the person of Trey Lance. But Tim, as again, somebody who has played the position at a high level, what is it that you have seen from Trey Lance that makes you say, look, is he there yet? Probably not. But here are all the things that I can point to and be like, hey, this kid is probably going to be really good.
Well, he's going to be special. And I said that earlier. There are just a few things about Trey Lance that I would need to fix. And you know, I said it earlier. I said it in a tweet, and I believe Jordan touched on it. Game reps is what he needs. Um, the things that I believe Scangarello were talking about, where he says I can't fix some of his mechanics, and Trey Lance doesn't have the fastest release. He doesn't. He's kind of one of those big body guys that has the ball swooping around, and I mean, an over exaggerated version of that would be Tim Tebow, where you watch and the ball comes down by his waist and he brings it up and it's a big swooping motion. That's a very, very hard thing to fix this late in somebody's career. And I don't know if you remember watching Tebow after the draft and all of the drills and everything that were kind of put out into the media of working with different quarterback coaches and ways for him to try and change his throwing motion. But eventually when he got back into the game, all of that went away because he relied back upon what he's been doing for years and years and years, and your body just remembers how it naturally throws something. It takes 10,000 hours for you to develop like a professional grade or a muscle memory type at an extremely high level under stress situations. That 10,000 rule, that's no joke. Like, you have to put in the time and the reps. So when you're doing something naturally, it's very hard to fix that. Now, the piece for me, I don't expect Trey's release to change. I don't expect it to become much faster. What I expect to happen with more game reps is his decision making. And we can point to a couple of different plays in the Texans game, especially, where when you watch Trey Lance, he has open guys. And a tweet that I sent out, I believe it was 2 days ago or yesterday, and it talks about where Trey Lance can give you sort of this, what is he doing in the middle of a play, into, oh my goodness, that was an athletic, unbelievable play for him to salvage something. And so thank you, Brian. You're pulling up this read right here. And as you can see, the 49ers with Trey under center, they have 4 wide receivers, and they're basically going to run 4 slants. And with the defense, as you see it, this is a 3-step drop, and Trey Lance basically has his pick. The only person that really isn't open right now is the bottom slot receiver, because that person's kind of playing inside leverage. But when you have a closed field, and closed means a single high safety, most time the DBs are going to have outside leverage because they have help inside from the safety. But when you run slants, the receivers, it could be a 2-3 step slant. Up top, he has George Kittle in the slot, and George Kittle, when he makes his break, is going to be wide open. The top receiver is going to break open above him. So for me, this is the most concerning part about Trey Lance early in his career. Is it's, again, very limited time. We're talking about 2.5 games, but as you watch, 1, 2, 3, ball's got to come out right there. Both players were open, but in the same opportunity, Trey Lance is able to escape a pocket, unfortunately, that he created because it closed. He took too long. And as the play progresses on, you would see him kind of roll right and use his athleticism. But look at how open both guys up top were. Trey Lance comes, there you go, Brian, ready? And play right there. So now ball's out. It should be out to George Kittle in that space. Hit him on his back number in the 8 and let him go to work. Trey Lance is able to roll and then throw a dime to Ayuk on the run. Again, this isn't so much where I'm saying Trey Lance is a bust, because he's not. This is just something with game repetitions now. Like, if you feel like the middle linebacker, the Mike linebacker, who is stumbling, actually going backwards, if you don't feel confident throwing off of his shoulder into George Kittle's chest, you see how far off the corner is. You put that ball right in the top receiver's chest, and you let him fall forward for a first down. If that doesn't work for you, I mean, take a look at the bottom of the screen. The inside slot receiver was able to take an inside release, dragging that DB inside, and it gives Ayuk all the daylight in the world. Now, again, I'm picking and choosing a play where he had 3 open receivers at the top of his drop. He's able to create, throw on the move, and get a completion. That's, I mean, it's frustrating. And I remember as a player in the quarterback room watching film after games, my coach would tell me, and he would say, I went from being frustrated to now you're being congratulated. Like, that was something that you can do this occasionally. This should be something that saves a play when it doesn't work, or when the defense has the right, has the right call. But it can't be something that you rely on for a career. If you are a reactionary quarterback, your time in the league isn't going to be long. If you're proactive, if you are able to diagnose and understand what the defense is doing, throw at the top of your drop on timing, life is going to be much, much easier. The second play that I want to show so you're going to see the frustrating part from the coaching staff side and from the play design. Ball out right now. It needs to get to George Kittle. And I understand what's coming later is an incredibly athletic and an incredible, like, you see the arm talent where there is zero concern about Trey Lance's arm strength. But that ball needs to come out right now to George Kittle. The defender is 5-6 yards off and 1 to 2 yards behind him. Get the ball in one of your best playmakers' hands and let him break a tackle and go down the sideline, because who catches the ball right now, Sherfield, could turn and block that defender, and George Kittle is off to the races. There's no question there. But as this play progresses, Trey doesn't throw to Kittle for whatever reason, but being able to backpedal, avoid a defender, almost pump fake, get that defender up in the air, and then create a window to throw the ball about 15 yards down the field and then outside. That is one of the hardest throws, going opposite your motion. So if you're a right-handed player going left, or if you're a lefty like me going right, backing away from the throw, any question about arm strength is answered by watching that throw right there. There's zero concern on arm strength. There's zero concern on athleticism. And quite frankly, I feel like after watching every single snap of Trey Lance's NFL career, his eyes naturally have gone further down the field than the first available option in the kind of Jimmy Garoppolo-esque created offense, because Jimmy's throws are shorter, and I feel like Kyle has put the playmakers in the position to where the throws are going to be either shorter or breaking towards the middle of the field. Trey Lance's eyes have immediately gone a little deeper. The kind of like, you got to see the second half of the Texans game, and this is when it felt like the play calling started to benefit Trey Lance. And he's, as Jordan mentioned earlier, a very good play fake. And if there's any question about arm strength, that throw was not, there was no lob. There was no loft the ball at a 45-degree angle and try and let your receiver run under it. That throw is on a line.
That was a rope. It was a frozen rope.
It hits Deebo Samuel in the chest enough to like almost knock him backwards. Like, that is a vicious throw, one of which there's only, I would say there's probably 6 to 8 quarterbacks in the NFL that can make that throw. Now, can they make a throw that is lobbed in the air and the receiver has to run under it and he probably runs out of bounds at about the 10? Yeah, there's a bunch. But to be able to put the ball on a line, hit your receiver in the chest enough where he can make a play, stay in bounds, and score a touchdown, I could not give you 10 quarterbacks in the NFL with that arm talent, that strength right now.
Jordan, I know that you also had the opportunity to spend a lot of time at camp last offseason. And so I know you touched on it a little bit, but, seeing him in person and seeing some of those throws, I mean, what was your impression when it came to, outside of, man, he probably needs to throw that a little bit less, with less velocity. But I mean, does it wow you in person like it wowed me just watching on TV?
Yeah, I don't know if this was the best analogy, but this is something I came away with, right? So I used to play baseball, right? And I was a pitcher. I played center field. Once upon a time, I had a pretty decent arm, right? And I feel like sometimes people just naturally have that ability. You know, Tim, I've caught footballs from Tim. I know he has a fantastic arm as well. Some people, I think, no matter how much you refine your craft, some people are just natural throwers of objects, footballs, baseballs. If you want to pick up a golf ball and throw it, whatever floats your boat. If you have the arm, you have the arm. And to me, Trey Lance is a guy where I was sitting there and I'm like, if this guy never played a game of baseball or softball, whatever, in his life, and you put him in like a rec softball league and you had him catch a sac fly from 200 feet out in center field, I have zero doubt in my mind he's throwing a rope to home plate. And my whole point with that, it was funny. Somebody's like, who's the third overall pick? I'd hope he could play in a rec softball. And I was like, that's not my point. My point is that the guy just naturally felt like somebody who picked up a football. And again, as Tim mentioned, the throwing motion is a little bit, less than ideal. A lot, say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo, but his quick release definitely was one of his, strengths. I just feel like Trey Lance is somebody who picked up a football at a very young age, or picked up whatever sport he was playing at a very young age, and just naturally had that ability to throw the ball around like that. And I think that talent let him get by for long enough, whether it was just playing with his friends off to the side, not even necessarily an organized, sport, like just having that ability. It's really hard to sit there at a young age and think, well, I'm doing this wrong. I'm out here throwing darts all over the place, even if you're, recess with your friends at a young age. And I think that that's kind of where I'm at with Trey Lance, where he just naturally has that ability. So at this point, it's how can you like harness it at that point, if that makes sense. Like, I agree completely with what Tim said. It's going to be really hard to get the guy to completely scrap everything he's done and rebuild him up from nothing. And ideally, you don't do that with the third overall pick. You shouldn't have to do that. But I also think that natural ability that he has is going to kind of accelerate the period of growth that you're going to have to go through with any rookie. Because like if we talk about like that throw that he made in the Texans game, to me, what doesn't get talked about enough with that throw is the trajectory. Like, just like Tim was saying, like there's a lot of quarterbacks that could get the ball to that spot or in that area. I can't recall watching a ball thrown 35 yards down the field in an NFL game where the ball stayed on the broadcast angle the whole time. Because when we watch film, when we watch the coaches' film, you get to see everything. On a broadcast angle, most of the time when the ball's getting thrown 20 plus yards downfield, you're going to lose it for a second. It's going to go up over the screen. It's going to disappear. So ultimately, what I saw in person was somebody where, like during training camp, when I was tweeting and doing my stuff and I was covering it, was I kept saying that it was jumping out of his hand. And that's really what it felt like to me. Because while I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is, sporting a rocket launcher arm by any means, I also think his arm strength concerns have been a little bit overblown. Like he has good velocity on a lot of his balls. He has a quick release. His mechanics aren't as bad as I think people make it out to be. But watching those two throw side by side, it was insane how much more the ball just, again, jumped out of Trey Lance's hand. So he's just somebody where, again, I feel like he has the natural physical ability. It's really about, at this point, about what can you do to work on the stuff. Like I thought Tim did a great job breaking down that first play, because Kyle's going to get guys open for you, right? Like it's been proven that Kyle's one of the brighter offensive minds in the league. He's going to do a fantastic job on these crossers, on these search routes over the middle, quick slants, all that stuff. They're going to be there. You just have to trust it. And I think that's ultimately where the game reps come in, because the more and more you're making those throws in that environment against NFL defenses, against an NFL pass rush, in the very, very small window you have to drop back and throw in the NFL, the more you're going to trust your ability to do so. The other thing I would add real quick too is I agree completely. So that second play that Tim showed where he had Kittle, at the time, because I understand everybody wants Trey Lance to come in and be fantastic. I completely get it. And I'm far from a Jimmy Garoppolo like apologist or excuse maker, but I was like, hey, Jimmy probably throws that check down to Kittle, and Kittle probably picks up 10 or 15 yards running after the catch. And that's been a staple of the 49ers offense. It works. It's kind of a situation where I can't really sum it up better than Tim can. I just want to echo what he said, because yes, the throw he made to Sherfield was fantastic. It's like to go on your back foot against your body and throw like that on a rope, 15 yards. That's really difficult. Statistically, I still think we can break down football in terms of like how many times you're going to get away with doing stuff like that over the course of your career. And if we're talking odds, the odds of successfully repeating that over and over again aren't great. So while, hey, if the 2 or 3 of those throws happen every game, fantastic. It doesn't have to with Trey Lance. If he can just trust himself to take those checkdowns and to take those, the gimme throws, the layup throws. Hey, it's not glamorous. It's not, it's not going to be on Sports Center top 10. They may not be sitting around on game day on Sunday night on NFL Network talking up a storm, but you know what's going to happen? The 49ers are going to win a lot of football games. And I think that's really where the 49ers are at right now, is how can we take this natural throwing ability that he has, but also get just the I don't say the bare minimum. You guys get what I'm saying? Like kind of we don't need all of that right now, Trey.
The Jimmy gimmies.
We just need the Jimmy gimmies. That's all we need from you. And if you give us stuff on top of it, that's a bonus. But that's the thing that kind of stood out to me, was it felt like there were times where the layup was overlooked. And hey, if you still get a first down, there's a lot of ways to bake a cake, right? If you get it, people aren't going to criticize it, but it's going to come back to when you start losing football games and things start going, the other way. That's when we're going to go and pull up these plays. Hey, if the 49ers lose to the Texans and that throw he throws to Sherfield's incomplete, Tim or I or you or anyone else can easily pull up that play and be like, maybe if he checks down to Kittle, this game goes a little bit differently, or maybe that drive continues. So the natural ability is there. And that's the biggest thing to me, is that he has the physical ability, and the 49ers have, in my eyes, one of the top 2 offensive minds in the league. It's very, very hard for me to see a scenario where that pairing doesn't end in at least, a team that's continuously in the playoffs and in the conversation. Are they going to be a dynasty? I don't know. It's hard to win one Super Bowl. You know what I mean? People are talking about Trey Lance rattling off 4 or 5 Super Bowls. Hey, if that happens, fantastic. I don't think anybody's complaining. I think they're perennial contenders, and I think we're in a position where you're going to see the 49ers in a spot where you're not sweating out these games every single Sunday in the fourth quarter. Like, please, for the love of God, don't let this pass rush run out of gas. Like, we're clinging to a 3-point lead when we've, accumulated 450 yards of offense and we're sweating out these games week to week. I don't think that's going to be a concern anymore.
Well, one of my favorite analysts is Nate Tice, and he comes on a lot with Robert Mays on the Athletics NFL football show. He writes for the Athletic as well. He is who's his dad? Mike Tice. He's Mike Tice's son, but he played quarterback at Wisconsin. And one of the things that he talked about in terms of Trey Lance and what he could open up is essentially the deeper levels of the Shanahan route trees, right? So again, Jimmy is content living in that shallow to intermediate, level, right? But there is that deeper level that he tends to ignore. And now you have a guy with the arm to take advantage of that deeper level. And I think that's where Trey opens up the offense more than Jimmy does. Is he can hit at all 3 levels now, as opposed to just really those first 2. And that's, to me, ultimately, that's what I'm most excited about. I think he has the processing ability to hit the Jimmy gimmies, to hit the intermediate routes. He'll, with more reps, he'll get the anticipation, he'll get the timing. It's just a matter of getting in the game and doing it. And so again, I just think ultimately it's just a little bit of nonsense that the coaching staff was underwhelmed by his arm or by his leadership or his processing. Because again, by all accounts, that's what made Shanahan fall in love with him, was his processing, his ability on the chalkboard. Peter Schrager said prior to the draft, what he's hearing is that Trey Lance is a football savant. So again, it just doesn't track with what we know and what we've heard about Trey Lance. And so ultimately, I think that's kind of what I was hoping we'd be able to put to bed tonight. And honestly, I'm probably biased, but it feels like we have.
So, okay, I need to touch on just a couple of things, because it infuriates me that the narrative is anything other than Trey Lance needs game reps to become successful in the NFL. His completion percentage is a little bit worrying. It was in the 50s, okay? And again, Jordan touched on it a little bit, where Trey Lance, instead of taking and I believe you called them the Jimmy Gimmies. There it is, Pedro Tafoya. Thank you so much. The Jimmy Gimmies. Okay. Instead of taking those, he was taking shots down the field after he kind of hesitated. Now, you can't make a career out of that. And again, Jordan said he's going to get roasted if this is how he continues to play. We can all see that. When there's nothing that a quarterback needs more than confidence. Confidence in yourself, confidence in your ability, and confidence in your teammates to be able to get the job done. Now, that's what some of the Jimmy Gimmies will be able to give Trey Lance. Having some easy throws, getting some completions, and then having the ability for your guys to get that yak, those yards after catch, is going to do nothing but skyrocket Trey Lance's confidence, for him to be able to feel like in the first play that we showed, where it was the 4 receiver set on the 4 breaking slants going in, he would then have that confidence to hit his back step at the top of his drop and then fire a slant either in the back shoulder or the 8, if you will, of George Kittle, or throw it to the top receiver. Like, he needs the confidence in himself and his teammates to be able to do that. You think back to, Jordan, I believe you said, some people have said, oh, it's a dynasty already. Trey Lance is going to rattle off Super Bowl after Super Bowl. You said, I think 4, right? Or 4 or 5, right? Something
I've
like
heard
that.
an absurd amount of Super Bowls for, again, for not only for a guy who hasn't really been there. The 49ers haven't won a Super Bowl in 26 years, man. Like, 1 would be okay. I think we'd all be happy with 1, right? Like,
pump the brakes, everybody. Like, calm down. Like, I don't think you understand how hard it is just to make a Super Bowl, let alone win one. And then even take it a step back, just make a conference championship game. And that's one of the things that, look, the 49ers have been in 2 of the last 3 NFC championship games. That's phenomenal. Go back to the Joe Montana era. Okay. He won 4 Super Bowls. Yes. But that was over the span. They won their first one in 82. They won their second in 84. Then they won one in 89 and then 90. Okay. That was over the course of, 7, 8 years. Were they in the NFC championship game every year? No, there were years they got bounced in the first round. It was up and down. The one thing, though, that you have to remember about that era, and why was Joe Montana so gosh darn successful? He was probably the smartest quarterback on the field in understanding what the defense was going to give him. And I mean, I don't know, Jordan or Brian, if you guys watched I believe it was on Peacock, the Joe Montana documentary, and it was like the 6-part series. And his coaches, like, they talked about where they would play, like, they would be playing games before practice or during games, and they'd flip over those cards where you're trying to make a match and you have to remember visually where they are. It took him like 5 or 6 times of just flipping cards over, and he would instantly memorize everything. And he'd be able to just flip over every single card and match every single one of them. And then it goes on to say, like, Bill Walsh was his perfect mentor, in the sense that the way Bill Walsh drew up plays on the chalkboard was exactly how he was able to diagnose and remember what it would look like on the field. So when he would see the defense and the play would be called, he would remember and he'd visualize in his mind exactly where all of the receivers are going. And the reason I bring this up is that's what makes me so excited about Trey Lance, in the sense that cognitively, everyone has said he could match or rival Kyle Shanahan in football intelligence. That to me is extremely exciting, because we know Kyle is going to get guys open. So if Kyle is going to scheme guys open, if we can get Trey Lance to build some confidence, game repetitions, get some easy throws early, at that point, Trey Lance is then going to believe in himself to slice up the defense, and he's going to be able to take advantage of Kyle Shanahan's offense, which I believe personally is we're going to see it evolve this year into a more vertical passing game and a more inside the tackles running game. I think that's kind of been spoken to with the running backs that they've been drafting. It's going to be power run inside. We're going to see a lot of probably zone read, and then we're going to see more vertical passing. And Trey Lance is going to, honestly, he's going to show off his arm talent. To me, it's going to be a kind of a blend of what we've seen from the 49ers and then that Atlanta Falcons offense where Matt Ryan won the MVP. I think we're going to kind of see a blend of that moving forward. So again, that was a long-winded little response. I'm just saying, pump the brakes before we win 5 Super Bowls with Trey Lance. But he's going to be good. He's going to get us to that higher level. I think he's going to be real special.
Awesome. Hey, appreciate you, Jamal. We do have a GOAT special guest and the artist formerly known as Splash Cousin. Hey, I want to respect Jordan's time. We said we get about an hour. We're about 55 minutes in. I did want to touch briefly, and it can really be just as brief as you want to make it. But one of the other things that I want to touch on was kind of some of the rumors, or at least some of the Twitter, I guess, moment, if you will, starting to think about, hey, is Jimmy Garoppolo, what's going on with that situation? And so I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on what you thought would essentially be the culmination or the ending of the Jimmy Garoppolo saga. Some people think that the 49ers are getting ready to screw Jimmy Garoppolo over. Personally, I think it feels almost tit for tat in that, hey, we were deep in discussions. John Lynch has said we were essentially kind of deep in discussions with some teams, and then the surgery happened, and all of a sudden those came to a screeching halt. We know that they had asked him to get surgery right after the season, which would have made him, ready to throw earlier. Ultimately, it doesn't appear that there are very many suitors left. Do you think they'll cut him? Brian Peacock made a great point on the most recent episode of Locked On 49ers. Possibly they're not ready to cut him because they're afraid that he's going to go to Seattle, which I never personally really thought about until then. And I was like, oh man, that's a great point. Do you really want your quarterback with the knowledge of your playbook that Jimmy Garoppolo would have going to your biggest rival? Probably not. I was one that was always like, hey, sure, go to Seattle, go for it. I'd love to play you twice a year. But ultimately, do you see Jimmy Garoppolo being on this roster come week 1 at $27.5 million as QB2? Or what do you think is the ultimate, culmination of what's going to happen with the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo?
I think ultimately right now, the only reason nothing's happening is just because he can't pass the physical. There's an injury clause in his contract. So if they cut him, they're throwing away $8 million. I think it's like 7.5 or somewhere between 7.5, $8 million, which is a lot of money to just part with, no matter how much you may have. And a team technically they could trade for him, but the majority of teams, even if they're signing free, non-priority free agents, practice squad guys, if you're coming on board at an NFL organization, you're getting a physical and you're having a physical passed if you're going to sign. That's just standard operating procedure. And I would be shocked if Jimmy Garoppolo was able to pass a physical at this point based on the fact that he can't even throw a football yet. So it's really funny to me when I see, I saw Colin Cowherd, who's, his work I respect. I think it's really hard to do a show by yourself for 3 hours, a day, 5 days a week. But I also think it lends to you filling airtime with things that are like, he said something along the lines of the 49ers just need to get it over with and trade Jimmy and bring on Trey. Hey, if they could trade Jimmy right now, I'm sure they would love to do it. I don't think this is a reluctance to trade Jimmy. I think it's literally he can't pass a physical, and no team is going to trade for a player who can't pass a physical right now. And I'm sure there's discussions or there's something in place, but it's, think about how many of these free agent deals and situations happen where a player comes in, they announce a signing or a trade, the physical happens, they fail it, and then you're right back to square one. If you know that's going to be the outcome already, what's the point of going through the whole circus of announcing that you have a trade, but hey, we have to wait for the physical 4 months from now? it just doesn't make much sense to me. So I think ultimately he will get moved for something. I still, I was under the impression that it would happen the last 6 weeks or so. I thought that they would. And again, I'm far from a Jimmy Garoppolo, truther or apologist. I think he's just kind of an average quarterback. He's not really going to put a team over the top, but he definitely is better than a lot of other options out there, which is why I don't think that it's crazy to expect that they'll get something for him. Now, are they going to get a first round pick for him? Absolutely not. I don't even think they're going to get a second or third round pick for him. But hey, if somebody's willing to part with a fourth or a fifth round pick at this point, you've held on to him this long. You might as well just hold on a little bit longer, because realistically, there's not much to gain at this point. A month ago, I was a bit concerned with just the outside noise and the development of Trey Lance by keeping Jimmy around. But it feels like since I made the argument at the time, it's honestly worth the $8 million to just cut him, to send a very clear message. Like, this is over. You spin it as some hey, thanks for your time here. Here's, a parting gift. $8 million is a pretty nice severance package, if you ask me. But I think that ultimately the 49ers have done enough to come out in, the public court of public opinion to make it known that Trey Lance is going to be the guy this year, that I can only imagine what they're telling him behind closed doors. So those concerns have been alleviated for me, from the sense of them kind of muddying the water a little bit with their intentions and it being unclear what the direction they're going to go is. I think that it's so funny. The real catalyst to all of this, that point that really makes me feel strongly about this, isn't Trey Lance and it's not Jimmy Garoppolo. It's Nate Sudfeld. They give Nate Sudfeld $2 million in guaranteed money. And I just don't think that you do that without having a strong belief that that's going to be your backup quarterback. And hey, maybe they have a situation where Jimmy takes a drastic pay cut and they keep him on and they have him be the quarterback too. And they have Nate Sudfeld basically be a $2 million practice squad QB3. I would have a hard time seeing them sign off on that. I'm not saying that, I don't think it's a situation about being cheap or them not willing to spend money. It's just a horrible mismanagement of assets if you were to do that. So it's like a process of elimination, right, guys? It's probably not going to be the guy you gave $2 million guaranteed to. It's definitely not going to be the guy you just traded 3 first-round picks for last year. But hey, here's the guy who has a dead money clause. It's like $1.5 million or something in dead money if they cut him. It just, all signs to me point to Jimmy being shipped out. And I think ultimately, if it comes down to it, they'll hang on to him through camp, and they'll hang on and, it's competition, and they'll have every cliche you've ever heard about iron sharpening iron and all that stuff. But it wouldn't surprise me if they don't get any offers, that you get up to the point near the season where they basically painted as Jimmy requesting a release, that Trey Lance beat him out for the job, and we're doing right by Jimmy Garoppolo and allowing him to test his mark and go be free. It feels almost crazy to say this based on how the last couple of seasons have gone, but I can't think of a scenario where Jimmy's on the roster this year that makes any sense to me. And it's wild because it's been the exact opposite in recent memory, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like it somehow, some way, they will spin this as a victory for the team. And say what you want about the 49ers. You may not agree with all their decisions. They're really, really good at winning public relations battles. Their PR department, I don't know if they have rafters in their office for PR stuff, but that rivaled the trophy case of Lombardi's they have over there.
PR banners.
Because they are damn good at doing this PR stuff. And again, that's where you get to a situation where, hey, maybe it is like, we went through the camp competition. We looked, we saw Trey Lance, he happened to be that guy. And then not only does it paint you as like the good guy letting Jimmy go, and also paints it as, wow, hey, well, he beat out Jimmy Garoppolo in a fair competition one-on-one. They must have really hit on that draft pick. Because as much as they'll tell you none of this matters, all that matters is what's on the field. The NFL is a business, and you need to nobody wants to go into a season feeling like their quarterback's a question mark, especially one that you invested all that stuff into. So I just see a million different avenues to Jimmy getting cut or traded that look good for the team. And I see absolutely zero where he comes back and it's a positive thing from an optics standpoint.
Because ultimately that contract does not become guaranteed until he's on the roster week 1. And so that's the deadline. That's 100% the deadline. And so, I think you're right. I think he's gone. I don't think he's going to be here week 1. Tim, anything to add? Your 2 cents in terms of what you think is going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo?
I find it kind of comical that everyone seems to forget how many players get hurt from this point forward all the way through camp. And there will be a quarterback on some team that winds up getting hurt, tearing something, and it may happen where they're done for either half the season or the full season. Like, it happens every single year. We find a guy and he winds up getting hurt. Hang on to Jimmy as long as you have to. And like you said, Brian, his contract isn't guaranteed until week 1. Keep him on the roster. Like, if you need to restructure some other guys so you can make sure that all of your draft picks and all of your undrafted free agents, all of them get signed and everything's good, that's what you have to do. And there's zero question in my mind that Jimmy Garoppolo won't be playing for another team during this football season, but there's zero reason. Like, if you feel like you have to get rid of him, you're going to get rid of him for less than what you could have gotten him for at a later point when another team becomes desperate. And it's good. It's gonna happen. It's a waiting game at this point. And I think the 49ers front office is confident enough in themselves. And I think they've given the message to Trey Lance that it is his team moving forward. So it really doesn't matter what we do with Garoppolo. You're good. You're our guy. We're moving forward with you. Just let this all play out. Everyone loves to over dramatize everything. We're all looking for a story. Everybody's looking for something that there's a reason everything's going to go wrong. No, hang on to Jimmy. It's fine. Let his shoulder heal. Let him be ready to pass a physical. Some team, some player, some quarterback's going to get hurt and they're going to get desperate and they're going to call. It'll happen. It'll happen.
Seems like we're all in agreement. Jimmy Garoppolo will not be on the roster come week 1 for the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. It's always fun to talk ball with you. Just want to give you an opportunity, plug anything that you want to plug here before we cheese on out of here.
Yeah, anytime, man. I love talking to you guys, especially, on camera is always fun, but anytime you guys got my number, it's always a pleasure. But yeah, you can find my stuff at SB Nation, Niners Nation more specifically. It's where I do most of my written work. I'm trying to get into the YouTube world. I'm not going to lie. I already had the utmost respect for a lot of the content creators in the 49ers world that do that stuff. Now that I realize how much work goes into doing YouTube 4 or 5 times a week, I have even more. So I have a channel that I want to say I'm working on, but I haven't done a video in like 3 weeks. So I'm trying to get better at doing that. But you can find, if you're into articles, if you're still old fashioned, you like reading written text, and stuff like that, which appears to be a dying art these days. I do work 3-4 times a week for Niners Nation. You can find my stuff there. It's a great group of content creators that do stuff for them as well, and are putting out great stuff. But yeah, that's where you can find most of my stuff, and you can find my Twitter @ on the screen. Right now it's kind of a slow time for football, so most of my tweets are probably going to be about my bets or me watching NHL or NBA playoffs. So just fair warning. I feel like a lot of people are a little disappointed. They go to follow me for football stuff and they see me yelling about Edmonton Oilers and Los Angeles Kings game, or getting fired up about the Warriors boat racing a team in the playoffs. And
let's go Dubs, baby.
Hey man, I'm just throwing it out there. We don't even have mini camp right now. My focus is 100% right now on the Warriors and what they're doing. So just fair warning before because I know there's a lot of 49ers fans who are Lakers fans or not really Warriors fans. I'm a Bay Area guy through and through. So if Bay Area teams are playing, I'm going to be on, Twitter, giving my support to them.
That is an interesting little combo there. You're right. There are a lot of 49ers and Lakers fans, which is interesting to me. But yeah, if you're not following, go ahead.
I was going to say real quick too. So Debo is a big Lakers guy. There was somebody else on the team who was a huge Lakers guy. Brandon Ayuk was at one of the Warriors games. I think it was the closeout game that they played against the Nuggets. And they had him in the screen, the same shot as Jordan Poole. And I'm not saying he's a Warriors fan, but he was voicing support for the Warriors and was sitting courtside at a Warriors playoff game in more of a capacity than just, I'm just here to watch. Like, I'm not outright saying Brandon Ayuk is a Warriors fan and Deebo Samuel isn't. I'm just saying that Brandon Ayuk showed more support for the Warriors than Deebo Samuel, the Lakers. ever
Where
will.
did IU grow up, man? He grew up in
Reno, right?
Northern
Reno,
Nevada,
Reno.
and then he
Yep.
went to Sierra College. Like, this dude loves Northern California sports, man. IU, that's my guy, dude. Like, he loves the Warriors, man. Come
Hey,
on.
man, I saw Jamal's comment too. Jamal's way too good of a guy to have to deal with what the Lakers are going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. So, you're always welcome to come root for the Warriors. I know when they're playing the Suns, you're probably going to be with us instead of them. Just throwing it out there, Jamal. You're way too good of a guy to deal with the heavy rebuild that's coming pretty soon, because we all know the writing's on the wall, man. Just throwing it out there. I know it was it was a tough year this year, but
They aren't getting any better.
things aren't.
They're not.
They don't have too many draft picks. They don't have too many young players. I'm just throwing it out there.
All right. So again, like I said, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. This was a blast. If you aren't following Jordan on Twitter, make sure you do so. Like he said, he will be talking basketball and hockey and gambling right now. But once camp starts, that's definitely a follow that you need to have. You can follow me on Twitter. My ad is on there at brennick77. You can follow Tim at Tim Sprinkles. Pretty easy to remember. And you can also follow the Denim Dungeon on Twitter at Denim Dungeon. Also, if you're here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast app, make sure to rate and review. We would really appreciate it. And Tim, anything you want to add before we cheese on out of here? Oh, actually, real quick, before we do, hold on, man. Before we do, I know, I was going to say, one of our loyal listeners, Derek Novice, did send us some posters. Again, we are running a little late. I want to wait and open that on our next episode. So Derek, we got your posters.
Crushed.
We are pumped. I mean, Jordan, if you want to hang out while we open these posters, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, man. I got nothing.
All right. So Tim, the floor is yours, man. Let's open these things.
Well, here's what's going to happen, man. I'm going to mute so that I can grab it, undo all this stuff. You're going to have to kind of watch and narrate. I'll show and come on when I can. But yeah, so Derek, we appreciate it, man. I got the this wonderful thing in the mail. So let's see what we got.
All right. This is like an unboxing, right? Like, these are super popular on YouTube. And so here we are. So I'm going to have to do some, some hashtags here, hashtag unboxing, whatever, get some more views. But yeah, so Derek sent us, some posters. Looks like this first one here. Oh, love it. It's, that picture of Steve Young, cradling the Lombardi, the 5th Lombardi. It looks like it was the front page of, is that the San Francisco Chronicle? And it just says 5, and it's that picture of Steve Young just hugging that Lombardi trophy. And that was such a great moment on the sideline when he had who did he have remove the monkey from his back? Who was it? Anybody remember? He was on the sideline. He said, remove that, and someone grabbed the proverbial monkey.
Oh,
anybody know?
That?
Anybody in the comments know?
I wasn't born yet. I can't help you guys. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
God, Jordan, that hurts my heart, brother.
I was born 6 months after that Super Bowl, man. It's been nothing but pain.
Oh man.
You have never seen them win
brutal.
a Super Bowl?
Never.
That is brutal.
Does it weird you out that I've been alive for every single Super Bowl that the 49ers have won? Like,
because
no, not really.
That's
because
why.
you've told me how old you are. I'm sure it would fool the common individual that doesn't know you, that thinks you're 32 years old.
Oh my gosh. This is a 1991 Sacramento Surge team photo from their inaugural season. Oh my goodness. What was that? What was that league called? I think it's up in the top right corner.
It's the World League.
The World League, the Sacramento Surge. 1991. Does that mean you still weren't born, Jordan?
Yeah, I was born in June of 95.
Oh my God. Oh, I was about to turn 13. Yikes.
Hey, if it makes you guys feel any better, when I get out of this chair, I'm going to be feeling about 37, 38 years old. My back is definitely not that of a 26-year-old.
That does make me feel better. All right. We also got world champion San Francisco 49ers, Super Bowl 23 champions. Beautiful. I love it. Who's front and center there? Who do we got?
This is all right. Wow, this is the Kodak poster.
Kodak.
God, you got Joe Montana sitting front and center, right in the bottom.
Love it.
God,
Love
this is old school, Derek. Man, well done, brother.
Jordan, does Kodak mean anything to you other than Kodak Black?
Yeah, no, I was definitely right for the whole Kodak moment stuff.
Excellent.
And, you know,
Excellent.
like you can tell too with the, you know, so my dad grew up going, you know, he got season tickets at Candlestick right before, you know, the Niners hit their stride in the early 80s. So I grew up going to games there, and you can tell that last poster, there's a very specific shade of gold from like the mid 80s that they used on their stuff. And whenever I see that, like, you can tell that it's going to be like good stuff when you see that, like, there, it's like, it's not that like bright champagne gold they have now. Right, it's a little bit darker. And they honestly should go back to it if we're being honest, but I don't think they care what I have to say.
I love this one is interesting. It is, it looks like, I don't know. It's like an offensive lineman's dream poster, right? Like it's a bunch of O linemen, and it says San Francisco 49ers on the bottom, but 49ers is spelled 49RS. I don't know that I've ever seen that. Interesting. Okay. I love it. With the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. This is compelling. This is compelling, especially for those that are going to listen on the podcast. I am trying to do my best to describe these. Here's just a Joe Cool poster, and it's just, you know, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, the second greatest. I don't know. I'm not ready to get in that fight right now. Hard to argue against Tom Brady. Hard to argue against the guy that has, you know, more rings than any other franchise. Besides, not even besides the Patriots. Any other franchise,
he has the most
because he got that one. He got that one with the Bucks. So,
but he's even come out and he's said that if Joe Montana played in this era the way they protect quarterbacks today, he would have 10 Super Bowl. Like there'd be no chance. He said that.
I don't want to upset the old crowd of 49ers Twitter, and especially, you know, guys who grew up watching. But I don't like those comments, to be honest, because this is my issue, is that if you go back, it's the same thing you hear in the NBA. Just the way that sports medicine has evolved, the way that training has evolved, like, yeah, sure, it was a bit more physical. You could get away with stuff that they don't allow now. But realistically, too, like if you go back and you watch defensive back play, you watch defensive ends, sure, you have standout players. Like, yeah, hey, Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor are going to, you know, be fantastic in any era. But if we're talking competition top to bottom, athletes now are so much better. I don't think it's fair to just be like, oh, just because Joe Montana, they allowed roughing the passer and guys could get thrown around a little bit, that he would step into this era where guys, the windows are a lot smaller. Defensive backs are faster than they've ever been. They're training year round. Hey, you have to hear me out on this. These guys in April are doing the same kind of training they're doing in November. Back in those days, Joe Montana was throwing against guys that had off-season jobs. The NFL was nowhere near as lucrative as it is now.
That's a great point.
So I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not – Joe Montana is one of those guys where, yes, I think he could be just as great, but I don't think it's this foregone conclusion that he's, like, infinitely better. I think Joe Montana would be Joe Montana in any era, but I also think that if you get to, like, all right, there's 53 guys on a football roster. Let's say there's 10 guys on those 49ers teams at the top. You know, you have your Carl Haley's, Ronnie Lott's, John Taylor's, Jerry Rice. Those guys are going to be great in any era. But if we start getting deep down that roster, I don't know, man. I can't say with confidence that those guys are going to be, you know, more dominant now simply because the game's maybe a little less physical. Because I do agree that there's a level of like, hey, receivers would get pummeled over the middle, right? Like that's part of why I think makes Jerry Rice so great, is that he played at a time where you really could headhunt. But at the same time, too, I also think that guys like Jerry Rice in that era didn't see the same level of athleticism from the DBs they're going up against. So I'm not like making the argument that it's like, oh, the competition was terrible. Then that's not at all what I'm saying. I want to be very clear. I just think that it's unfair to write off the current era when I think that it's kind of like, hey, while there was physicality in the 80s, I think now there's a little bit more athleticism. There's more, I think we can all agree there's more speed on the field on all 11 positions on both sides of the ball than there has been. Like, I don't know, like I personally think that it's a little unfair to just say that Joe Montana would come in and would be, winning. Like, do you think he wins 8 Super Bowls if he plays the same career length, but starting at the same time Tom Brady does? You really do? I don't know.
Again, if you are listening to this in audio format, the look on Tim's face as Jordan was going through that was priceless.
He knows the points have some layer of logic behind them, which is why he's totally not ripping into me right now. Like it's killing him on the inside because he's like, "Hey man, this is my childhood idol. I watched Montana.
No. I was being quiet to let you talk, and now, young one, you must be quiet and listen. Respect your elders. Who's the best defensive back to ever play the game?
Probably Deion Sanders.
Exactly. He played against Jerry Rice. Who's the fastest defensive back to ever
play? That's one player.
Darryl Green.
That's one player. Two
overall. You're talking about the athletes have progressed to a point where I will say yes, that the technology, the understanding of how the human body works. Obviously, there's so much that goes into it today that give the majority of the players all are elevated. But when you talk about the best that I've ever seen, you talk about Jerry Rice, and what were the only things that limited Joe Montana from winning a Super Bowl virtually almost every single year? He got hurt.
Injuries.
He got hurt because you could. I mean, obviously, it's what ended my career is the fact that you could hit a quarterback as hard as you wanted. Destroy. That was what they wanted to do. Destroy the quarterback. Knock the quarterback out of the game. That's how you're going to be successful. Of course, if in today's NFL, if Joe Montana had the opportunity to sit back in a pocket where players knew, one, that they were going to get fined or potentially suspended for killing a guy like they did with Joe Montana multiple times, he'd pick a defense apart. And secondly, receivers in Jerry Rice's era, John Taylor's era, Dwight Clark's era, Freddie Solomon's era, they had to run through guys who were just grabbing and holding and pulling and yanking. They had to do everything they possibly could to get open. And today you can't touch a receiver. I'm sorry. Like, I get it. I'm biased. I'm old. I know.
The future's now, old man.
It is. Hey, I try, man, but there's just a few players like the Lawrence Taylors, the Joe Montanas, the Jerry Rices that are good no matter what era you're playing.
Yeah, no, and that's not the argument I'm making. And I think that's total. I completely agree with that. But what I'm saying is once you get past the layer of like all pro, like all generational talents, like Lawrence Taylor and Joe Montana, like, let's be honest, if you're going through and you're looking at players from that era, it's not like, oh my God, they're so bad. And it's the game's different now. But I'm just saying, like, if you took there's a lot of players from the 80s that were Pro Bowl players at that time that were among the league's best. Again, I'm not talking about Joe Montana and Deion Sanders and Jerry Rice. I'm talking about guys that, year to year were amongst their best. They wouldn't even be playable in the modern NFL because of how much this game has changed and the speed that the game is played. Think about all these guys that were wearing huge neck rolls, that were these big, mean inside backers. Think about the Bears. You think that the Bears could go out and win a Super Bowl running a 4-6 defense? I don't care how many good players they have on that defense. The way the game is played now, maybe the Bears themselves, okay, the 86 Bears were so good, they could probably still do it. But in general, could you really get away with running that amount of base defense? 5 what?
85.
Oh, 85 Bears. 85 Bears, sorry.
I'm old, so I know those things.
So you get what I'm saying, though, right? Like, if you took the 85 Bears, if you took that defensive scheme, how many teams are running a 4-6 base defense and throwing that out there 80% of their snaps? Like, you can't do that anymore. Teams are going to expose you horizontally as much as they will vertically with the amount of speed that they get. So that's just kind of my point, is that, yes, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, those guys, hey, if Joe Montana played at the same time as Tom Brady, I have no doubt that he could still probably win 3 or 4 Super Bowls. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't be able to. My point is that I don't think it's like automatic, like, oh, well, he won 4 then, he's winning 8 now. Like, I think that there's so much that goes into play. And realistically, too, I'm a big proponent of giving Kyle Shanahan credit, as great as I think Joe Montana is. And I think that, you need the driver to pilot the car. Bill Walsh built a pretty damn good car. And that kind of West Coast offense that he ushered in and that stuff that he kind of took from Cincinnati and brought with him to San Francisco, it was extremely revolutionary at the time. I'm not saying that it should take away credit from what Joe Montana did, but I also think that it was like the perfect storm for the success the 49ers had. Again, I think Joe Montana is one of the best quarterbacks ever. If we're looking at resume and everything, you could argue he is the best because of how he played in big games and all that stuff. I just don't like the narrative because I'll be honest with you. I see it way more with arguments when it comes to like basketball and stuff like that than NFL. But I do think it is something that gets overlooked, where if we're talking about the NFL, it's the same thing where people talk about how, Jerry Rice, well, he put up this amount of yards back then, he'd go for a crazy amount now. Well, the NFL is built to defend the pass a hell of a lot better now than it was when Jerry Rice played. I'm not saying Jerry Rice wouldn't still be great, but I think it's unfair to just assume that he's going for 2,500 yards based simply on the fact that you can't tug guys at the line of scrimmage or you can't hit over the middle. Because again, I'm not trying to throw disrespect on that era, and especially as somebody who covers the team, I believe me, I've had plenty of older people in my mentions telling me I'm stupid and not to talk about it because I didn't see it. Guess what, man? That game tape still exists, and I can pull up some game tape from the 1980s of Jerry Rice dusting guys that wouldn't make a practice squad in today's NFL. So I'm just throwing it out there that I don't think it's fair to discredit today's athletes to build up greats like Jerry Rice and Joe Montana, who would be good no matter what. We don't need to put down today's NFL. And especially, again, when you look at the kind of think about it. There's a large portion of the NFL in the 1980s where they literally were insurance salesmen selling cars. And that's not to disparage them. It's literally the NFL was not lucrative enough where these guys could afford to just train around the year. They had to provide for their families. Like, this isn't like, I know people make the jokes about, I don't know if you guys have heard, they say like Michael Jordan played against plumbers and stuff. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is today's NFL, even the guys coming in as 7th round draft picks are making enough money that they can literally train 365 days a year. They have nutritionists, they have trainers for 7 different things. That, to me, it's created a league with the top heavy stuff's always going to be there. But when we're talking about the positions 20 through 53 on an NFL roster, it's so much more athletic now because these guys have such an advantage to be able to hone in on their craft and work on it day in and day out that I don't think existed 35 years ago.
All of the guys with today's technology would be that way. It's just, you can't say that pick and choose. Only the greats would be able to compete in today's NFL. If you're giving the technology and today's rules and all of that kind of stuff to the greats, give it to everybody and then it balances out. The bottom line is the only thing I'm focused on, I don't give a rip about the fact that, the technology's better, the nutrition's better, they're not plumbers or contractors in the off season. No, I'm talking about the fact that the rules today benefit offense more than they ever have. So Joe Montana, in today's NFL, where you can't touch a guy, you can't touch the receivers, it's pass dominated. Yeah, he's going to throw. He's going to have more than Tom Brady, in my opinion.
Yeah, but this is the thing, though, is that as much as it's opening up for the offense, defenses have had to adjust, and defenses now are faster and built more to defend the pass than they ever have. So that's all I'm saying, is that it's not like it's just like these defenses, like, even if we go back to like when I grew up watching football, like the early 2000s, like right now, like, hey, the 2002 Bucks were one of the best defenses I've ever seen, right?
My heart.
Or those Ravens were one of the best defenses I've ever seen. Do you think they could play that exact same style of football against a team like the Chiefs, like the last couple seasons, and have the same level I don't think they'd have the same level of success. They'd have to adapt. So that's all that I'm saying, is that as the NFL's changed and like teams have had to adapt, I don't think it's fair to just be like, oh, well, just because it's going to be so much easier for Joe Montana because of the rules. Because I think you also have to account for the fact that defenses have changed and defenses have gotten faster, and the defensive side has also improved a ton, in my opinion. Again, I am no authority to sit here and say Joe Montana wouldn't be great, and that's not at all what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I spent way more time than I should on Twitter, but I think that there is an absurd irrational line of thinking where I've literally seen people say that they think Jerry Rice will be a 3,000-yard receiver in today's NFL.
See what Jamal's saying? That's what I'm talking about. Jamal, you're my guy. Well done.
Jamal, I would strongly urge you to go back and watch don't watch don't watch the 49ers, don't watch the team from Washington, don't watch the New York Giants, don't watch Miami. Go back and watch some of the really bad teams from the 80s and 90s, and it will tell you all you need to know. They could change their scheme, they could change their playbooks and their defensive fronts and all that stuff. They would have a hard time sticking in today's NFL. Some of these guys, not all of them, some of them.
Against who? They'd be fine. They'd be very competitive against the Jacksonville Jaguars of today. You can't win a damn game at all.
Some of those teams that were bad in the 90s are still bad today.
You put Miles Jack in 1987, that man's first ballot, first team All-Pro.
Another Sacramento Surge poster.
Hey, those jerseys are awesome, man.
They're Chargers-esque for sure. Yeah, I loved them. Yeah, touchdown, March 1991. So, Derek, thank you for the posters. Had no idea it was going to spark a 30-minute conversation about whether. I'm
sorry. I didn't mean to ruin your guys' podcast.
No.
My hot take about that, but I'll be honest with you.
I absolutely loved it.
I'm a young, person in this like media field, and I haven't seen I never saw the 49ers glory years. All right. I grew up watching a heavy dose of Tim Rattay, Alex Smith, Don Hill, Troy Smith, that's what I grew up with. But what gets me is I have people, say, well, the NFC Championship game, making that's not acceptable. Like I saw Joe Montana do this and Joe Montana do that. And I'm like, hey, you know what, buddy? Joe Montana hasn't touched a football field in 25 years. So maybe it's time to curb expectations a little bit and understand that what the 49ers did in 1987 has absolutely zero bearing on what's going to happen with the 49ers in 2002. And again, it's the same argument that I make for like other sports, right? Like you think Wilt Chamberlain wouldn't be as good as he was then now? Like he'd still be the same athlete. He'd still be a freak of nature if he played now. Like there are certain athletes that are going to transcend eras. And I have no doubt in my mind that Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott would be in that same ballpark of success, no matter where you place them in the NFL in terms of, history. But this is kind of my thing, right? Like, I don't know if you guys saw this. There was a tweet where some guy said something about how like in the 60s, every team had a Deebo Samuel. Every team had a guy that was used like Deebo Samuel. And somebody like pulled up a picture of a guy with like a flat top, didn't look very athletic, like cigarette in his mouth, like mid-game in his pads. And it's like, yeah, you know what? You're being kind of disrespectful to Deebo Samuel at this point. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of my thing is that I will never sit here and disrespect the greatness that the 49ers had. I understand that for people older than myself, there was a certain, just like I'm sure 20 years from now, if the Warriors end up falling off or aren't as good as they are, I'm going to be sitting here telling, like you don't understand how it was back in the day and back in my day, like anytime somebody makes a three, I'm going to be like, well, Steph Curry did it better. Like I get that that's coming eventually for me. So I get it from that standpoint. I just think that to me, it diminishes like the actual results we've seen. And I think Tom Brady is really interesting because I think that he is somebody who kind of like straddled that line of the transition of those eras. But I also think that being a guy where Joe Montana was his idol and Tom Brady, for as much as he jokes around and is a fiery guy on the field, I don't think he's ever going to be the kind of person to come out and say like, I'm better than that guy. Are you kidding me? I'm better than that guy. So
not publicly.
Exactly. Like if you ask Tom Brady behind closed doors, if he's the greatest of all time, like I would be very interested to hear what, like, hey, he was just with Michael Jordan at that F1 race earlier, right? Like, yeah, that's a conversation I'd love to be a fly on the wall for. But I also understand that there's a certain group of people that watched Joe Montana do what he did and firmly believe that there's people out there, and a lot of them that think Steve Young was better than Joe Montana. They don't even think Joe Montana was the best 49ers quarterback of all time. So I don't want to open a whole new conversation and have Tim hate me and never want me back again.
I'll always love you, Jordan. I'll always love you, man. But
I'm just saying,
oh my God, if you want to talk about a quarterback controversy, if you think this Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo thing is any like it's spicy in any way, nothing. Nothing
Child's
compared to the Joe Montana, Steve Young quarterback controversy that lasted for years. It wasn't draft Trey Lance, Jimmy plays 1 year and then he's out. This was year after year after year of quarterback controversy. It was amazing. It was so good. It was so good. And wait, by the way, you said 1987. That was the year the 49ers lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Minnesota Vikings, who then lost to the Redskins, who beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl. I love being old and being able to remember these types of things.
Incredible.
Was that the year that they lost 49-3?
No. I think that was the year they lost 36-24 in the first round. I think Derek Novice, the person who sent me these, who's older than I am, could tell me that too.
Yeah, and see, and that's the thing. I never want to insult the Derricks of the world who've been watching 49ers football longer than I've been on this earth. I get it, man. I'm not trying to sit here and discredit any era. I just think that it's, again, Jerry Rice is probably putting up great numbers in any era. Just like I think right now, hey, if you took Calvin Johnson, you put Calvin Johnson on a team and starting in 19, I think he has a great career in the 80s. Certain guys are going to transcend eras no matter what. But I don't know, man. 7 Super Bowls, 10 Super Bowl appearances, like I have such a hard time. And I think Aaron Rodgers is a more talented quarterback than Tom Brady, right? Like I personally am probably a little biased. I'm a Cal guy. I think Rodgers is more talented. But like just looking at the overall resume, it's so hard. And I understand football is a team sport to the utmost, but like the imprint that Brady had on so many of these Super Bowls is really hard to ignore. Not that Joe Montana didn't, but I just think that it's like it's a situation, right? You know, I mentioned the same thing with Bill Walsh, how it was like a perfect marriage. Hey, if Tom Brady doesn't end up in New England and he doesn't have those years where they have that incredible defense for those first couple Super Bowls, maybe he's not Tom Brady. So I want to make it very clear that this isn't just like, oh, well, Joe Montana hit the lottery and ended up with Bill Walsh and this innovative offense right at the perfect time. I think a lot of that stuff is really dependent on that. And you get guys like I've talked to people who think that like Dan Marino and John Elway are way more talented than Joe Montana ever was, but they would never say that they're a better quarterback because of the ultimate way their careers played out. So, and again, hey, if you put Dan Marino threw for what, 5,000 yards? It was 1984. He threw for 5,000 yards. Like he did that back then in that NFL that I was talking about. So it's not impossible. I'm just saying that I think if we really break down the, like, again, let's say you take the top 20% of the NFL, it's going to translate to most eras. But when you really start getting down into depth and you start getting down into the bottom parts of the roster, I just think now guys haven't, and you're right. Hypothetically, if those guys were getting paid the same amount back then and they had the luxury to, there's nothing saying that they couldn't do it. I'm just saying based on what we know, we have no like objective like thing to fall back on because that unfortunately wasn't the case.
I remember
there's. Oh, go ahead.
I remember what it's like in the 80s to have a weight room with iron weights that are broken and chipped, and the floor is freezing. There's no heater. That it like I don't think you understand like what it used to be like to try and train in the 80s and 90s when technology had not yet caught up with what like it is today. It's just it made it so much harder. I can't tell you how hard it was to sit and watch film on a VHS tape or on one
I've
of those,
always been
like,
curious
reels.
about that. Did you get like is it the same like angle and everything? Like do you get that like behind the center kind of, how do they do it back? Because there's no way the cameras would have been as good. Like
only if you're willing to lift a camera up on a pole.
Scissor lift.
And yeah, like there would be like you'd have guys up in like machinery behind the end zones filming. And if I mean you can only watch, and
it had like the little like grainy screen where when you'd pause it would have like the lines going through. Oh man.
I mean, hold on. I still have like I had to make my highlight tape in high school to send to colleges for recruiting on a VHS. And if you know how hard that is, it's ridiculously hard. Like I still, to this day, if I had the internet, man, I would, I'm so pissed off that I didn't live with technology like we have to.
Really quick, I have to say, I know it's off topic, but like there's a page, and I'm sure you already got tagged a bunch in this, but there's like a page called like Random College Athletes where they literally
Tim has been featured on it.
Tim literally was on it. I just was scrolling my and I just see Tim in all his glory on random college athletes. I'm like, I know that guy. Like, this
number
is so
16.
Cool.
Number 16, Humboldt State, baby. Lumberjacks represent.
That's right.
All right.
I mean, it
has
was
been
fun. It was good.
It has been an hour and 40 minutes now. I don't know about you, Tim. I got to get my kids to bed.
Yeah, I'm sorry to whoever has to edit this too. My apologies for prolonging this.
You are assuming that we will edit this. We will not. This will go out in all its glory, just as it is, because hey, why not?
It's too
right?
good. It's too good.
But
too good.
Again, Jordan, I do appreciate so much of your time. And you know, I know Tim's heart cried a little bit. Perhaps his eyes, I'm not sure. But this was awesome. This was fun. Again, an unexpected conversation about how eras translate when it comes to the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever, right? Is Babe Ruth going to hit as many home runs if he's trying to hit 98-mile-an-hour gas all the time? Probably not.
Definitely not with that baseball they're using this year. I'll tell you that much. Whatever
dude,
that ball is they're using this year, he'd be lucky to hit 20 of them in a year.
Yeah, that is. I you know what? I don't want to rant on baseball to make us go longer, but for a sport that is arguably dying, to think to themselves, hey, you know what's going to get us more fans if we take away the most exciting thing that we do? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But hey, Rob Manfred, you do you, boo. You do you. But yeah, we appreciate your time, Jordan. Again, follow Jordan on Twitter at JLeeElliott. Again, the artist formerly known as @splash_cousin. You can follow me again at BRennick77. Tim is at Tim Sprinkles. Follow the Denim Dungeon at Denim Dungeon. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, El Jefe Tequila. I got it here on my hat. Tim's got it on his shirt. We got it down there in the corner. Again, I'm not a hard alcohol guy. I'm not a tequila guy. This stuff is legit. Go to www.eljefetequila.com and get your very own handcrafted tequila. This has been the Denim Dungeon and our new little let's get us on out of here. It's gonna be, Tim, Niners on me, Niners on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Niners.
Thank you.